appreciated, welcomed to the process of governance again. And anything that I can do, I feel like this is like my living room and you're all part of the house. And so just want you to feel relaxed, have a good evening. We're gonna listen to inspiring speakers. And thank you so much for being involved. Our country is not gonna be saved at the national level if our communities are not bound together with like-minded people and willing to fight for those principles that we believe in. So I hope that this is a continuation of this kind of camaraderie of the people, for the people, and by the people. But at this time, before we move on, I just want to take a minute to recognize a few special guests. We have Roxy Cooper. Do you mind standing, Roxy? I love this lady. If you don't know, this is Officer Ben Cooper's wife that we lost, along with several other police officers a couple years ago. So thank you so much for being here. It's just an honor to have you. We also have Officer Hershey and his wife, Misty, if you wouldn't mind standing. Thank you for being here, Officer Hershey. Do we have any veterans in the room? Any veterans? Will you please stand? I'll give you a round of applause. Thank you for your service. I want to tell you a little story. I love stories. So every night I would always tell my kids, now they're big enough to read to me, which is a blessing, but when they were little, we would all sit around and we would read stories till they fell asleep. And now when I'm tired, I seem to be the first one that goes to sleep. And so they'll say, well, what do you want to do? Or should we watch a movie? Or I'm like, no, just tell me a story. And so I love story time. But one of the things I heard this little parable and I want to share it with you. And it was talking about a merchant. I don't know if you've heard it or not before, but it was talking about a merchant and the great pearl. And so if you've heard this, you know where I'm about to go, but there was a world-renowned merchant who traveled the world seeking all of the finest jewels and the silks and all that he could find to bring back to his village. And one day, after he had accumulated all that he could find and thought was the best, his heart's desire was to find the most beautiful pearl in the world. So he traveled the world and he found what he thought and considered to be the most beautiful pearl, and he brought it home to his people, his village. And he put the finest silk out and had the most beautiful, intricate box built for this pearl so he could highlight it for his community and village when he opened it up to the public. So he had the box, the beautiful silk, and a beautiful pearl, and invited all of the people from the village to come and see what he brought from around the world. And the thing that he saw and noticed as people were coming through to see this beautiful pearl was everybody was talking about the craftsmanship of the box. Nobody really understood the value of the pearl. Sometimes, as elected officials, that's how I feel, that sometimes we're the box. We are not the people to be put on a pedestal, right? We're just average people. You guys need to know, the way I see you, you are the pearl. You are the people that make our community great. You're the people who add your time, talent, and treasure to our community to make it what it is. So anything that I can do to help you realize and recognize your worth and your value to me in this small space that I have as a stewardship for you is my number one heart's desire. So thank you for taking time out of your day to be here tonight. We're going to continue to do these and just bring a sense of community back into politics. So thank you for being here. Is Amanda here still? Amanda Kimball? Where is she? Did she walk out? She was playing the beautiful music. So if you wouldn't mind, just give her a big round of applause. So it is my honor at this time to introduce, come on up. My notes somehow got misplaced. Do you need any introduction? He's an awesome guy. This is Elijah O'Neill. He's actually with Mark One Radios and with the American Experience Museum. So I will just tell you a little bit about how I ran into Elijah. I was down in Dallas at a wall builders conference and was having an amazing experience. But then when I walked into the American History Museum, and listened to this guy, I was like, oh my gosh. How many of you guys are old enough to remember Reagan?
Whoa, let's lower standards here real quick.
I'm just saying, I remember being glued to the TV when he would come on as a young girl, and I remember listening to his inspirational messages about what it was to be an American. How long has it been since you felt good about being an American? It's been a long time. So when I walked into that museum, and Elijah was up there speaking with so much passion and investment in our community, into our country and our nation, and he was talking about the history, the culture, the richness of it, I was like, I want him to come. And I texted Kurt and said, this guy, his contact information, we need him coming to our area. So without any further ado, thank you, Elijah, so much for coming and giving of your gifts and time to my community. Thank you.
Check 1 2. Check 1 2. Am I on?
Is it on? Barely.
Check 1 2. Excellent. Very good. Well, everyone, thank you so much for having me tonight. My name is Elijah O'Neill. I'm the manager of education for Glenn Beck's American Journey Experience. And there at the museum, we have a collection of over 160,000 artifacts spanning from the time of Christopher Columbus all the way to the space race. And it's there where we tell of America's darkest hours, as well as our highest glories, all in the context of the artifacts that were actually present at those critical junctures. But you see, our commitment to history runs a lot deeper than most museums around the country. You see, we take the preservation of history as a moral duty, not a benign one. Why is that? Because we believe that history is to a nation as memory is to the individual. And if the individual forgets who they are, then the nation will begin to forget where it's come from, where it is, and its future will be all but certain. You see, putting these artifacts in a temperature-controlled, humidity-controlled museum is preserving history in form. But until that history is found in the hearts of the next generation, then it will be preserved in fact. And 400,000 boys during World War II didn't die so we could forget what they purchased for us. We owe it to them to carry on the struggle and the story of their sacrifice, not ultimately for their sake, but for our own. We must be willing to tell the stories of courage and virtue, because one day the young adults in this room will then exercise those same virtues in the administration of our country. I know it was already asked, but for the veterans that are in this room, can you please raise your hand? Can we give them one more round of applause? I want to recognize you again because the American warfighter has a special place in my heart. You are the guardians and the sentinels of freedom. And to you, we owe a great deal of gratitude. My grandfather, Frederick William O'Neill, joins your ranks. But to tell you of his story, I want to take us back in time. It is May 10th, 1940. Winston Churchill has assumed power as Prime Minister of His Majesty's government. Austria, Czechoslovakia, and Poland have fallen to the Nazis. In a matter of weeks, France is going to surrender, and Great Britain is going to be left without their greatest ally in all of Europe. In a matter of weeks, they are going to consider appeasement measures, the British Parliament, in trying to forfeit the majority of Europe in hopes that they can preserve what's left of their island. You see, the days in Great Britain are dark, but in the face of extreme danger, Churchill will choose hope. He was called the most revered statesman of the 20th century because through that darkness, he leaned on his boundless optimism, his courage, his tenacity, and his ability to mobilize the English language into its most effective fighting form, which was inspiration in the hearts of his countrymen. Winston knows that to defeat Germany, he mustn't only lead the United Kingdom in form, but actually unite the kingdom in fact. So he marches into the House of Commons and declares these words. Hitler knows that if he is to win this war, he will have to break us here in this island. But if we stand up to him, then all of Europe may be free, and the life of the world may move forward into broad, sunlit uplands. But if we fail, then the entire world, including these United States, including everything we have ever known and cared for, will sink into the abyss of a new dark age made more sinister and perhaps more protracted by the lights of perverted science. Let us therefore brace ourselves to our duties and so bear ourselves, that if the British Empire and its Commonwealth last for 1,000 years, men will still say that this was our finest hour. And you see, in the face of total evil, Churchill decided to choose faith, hope, and victory. So, ladies and gentlemen, the question is will America choose the same? The day that will live in infamy, December 7th, 1941, my grandfather, Frederick William O'Neill, was drafted into the United States Army exactly 2 weeks after that fateful day. He was part of a division that ultimately went to Normandy Beach on D-Day 2 and D-Day 3. He would liberate a Nazi concentration camp and be awarded the Bronze Star for conspicuous bravery in capturing and securing the surrender of 13 Germans and their tank. His military career would end when he was struck by an enemy grenade, and he would be found laying helpless until a young German woman nursed him back to health on the battlefield. He would then be sent back to the United States, and he would learn real estate, and he would get married, and he would have 4 boys. And when I learned about that history, it made me stand a little taller. It made me proud of where I had come from, because I understood the type of blood that runs through my veins and the stock that makes up my bones. And I started thinking about, can I live a life that will honor the pedigree from which I come from? I mean, look at me. No. 10 of you shook my hand when I walked in this evening. These things are way too soft and supple for the U.S. military, let me tell you. Also, my friend in the back, Mike, can attest that I cry approximately once a week. And I don't think the U.S. military wants that among its ranks. But in a way, I am jealous of my grandfather, because he never had to ask, as part of the greatest generation, he never had to ask if his life was worth living. Because he had to stand in the face of oblivion and defend that which he loved and left behind. There There is no better way to live, and certainly no better way to die. And the question is how do I live in a way that is going to honor that sacrifice? Well, that secret was told to us by Abraham Lincoln. He said that how you honor these fallen heroes is by living with increased devotion for the causes for which they gave their last full measure of devotion. And I think about who best embodied that principle. Well, none other than a man named Martin Treptow. You see, Martin Treptow was a young man in a barber shop in Iowa who eventually left to go fight the Germans in France. He would then leave his barber shop and join the famed Rainbow Division. And while he was fighting the Germans, he was tasked with carrying correspondence from one battalion to the other. He accepted the mission, and when he did that, unfortunately, he was struck and killed under heavy artillery fire and machine gun fire. When they recovered his body, they found a diary in his left breast pocket. And when they recovered that diary, what was written inside of it would inspire generations of Americans to come. He said, "America must win this war. Therefore, I will work, I will sacrifice, I will endure. I will fight cheerfully and give my utmost as if the whole issue of this entire struggle depended on me alone." And he understood the idea of duty. He understood what he was fighting for in the liberation of a continent not his own, because he understood that those rights were rights that should extend to all, not to a few. And that's why it was an incredible honor when I went to go work in the Texas House of Representatives during the 86th and 87th legislative sessions. I remember asking representatives and senators and lobbyists a very simple and a very basic question. And that question I would ask them is, what do you think makes America exceptional? What makes America different and stand holy amongst the rest of the nations on the face of the planet? And the answers that I received on that day were incredibly disappointing. They said, "Well, Elijah, what makes America different is the fact that we have the most powerful military on the face of the planet." Or Elijah, what makes America different is the fact that we are leaders in medical innovation and invention. Or what makes America different is the fact that we have the most robust economy on the face of the planet. Or even to some of the more conservative representatives, I would ask them the same question, and they would say, "Elijah, what makes us different is freedom and liberty." And while I would argue that all of those things are good, I would argue for the most part America has those things. None of those things that I mentioned make America different. They do not make America exceptional. You see, the reason why America is great, the reason why America was set aside from all the nations on the face of the planet, is because we understood a very simple but powerful principle. And you've probably heard it before. It goes like this: that we hold these truths to be self-evident. That all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. That among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just power from the consent of the governed. So you see, it doesn't matter what laws passed by Congress, what order is signed by the president, or what opinion is rendered by the Supreme Court, because we believe that there's a supreme being who holds within his hand the destiny of all nations and the destiny of every single man, woman, and child in this room. is what made America great. And from that understanding in our Declaration of Independence, then derived the blessings of liberty those representatives and senators were talking about. But while I was in that building, talking to all 150 of them, I had one representative be able to articulate why we were different. And what a scary thought. Because if you can't tell me where my rights come from, if you can't tell me what my rights even are, then how are you the guardian of them? You can't read a bill and tell me, well, what promotes limited government, individual liberty, freedom of enterprise, and timeless truths when you don't understand the basic precepts of our Declaration, which were then defended and enshrined by the U.S. Constitution. I would listen to them discuss the Bill of Rights. And they always talk about the First Amendment, freedom of speech, freedom of speech, freedom of speech. Yeah, and what does the rest of the amendment talk about? What does it say? Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or of the right of the people to peaceably assemble and petition the government for a redress of grievances. There are 5 things protected by that First Amendment, and most representatives could only articulate one of them. And then, when it comes to practical application of those laws, they didn't know what to do. You see, when you look at the Constitution, it's not that the First Amendment just gives you the freedom of speech. It's that, as the Declaration says, it enumerates and acknowledges rights given to you by a supreme being and supreme authority. Freedom of speech means that by the laws of nature, you are endowed with a tongue, and what comes off that tongue is your own. When it's freedom of religion, it doesn't just mean you can pray to whatever God you want. It means the laws of nature and nature's God has endowed you with your own conscience. Therefore, you can live according to the dictates of it. When it comes to assembly, it's because God made us, and the laws of nature require that we are communal beings. And therefore, the government's job is to protect the assembly of those we want to assemble with. And the idea of petitioning the government for a redress of grievances is understanding that when it steps out of bounds of what Romans 13 requires, which is that the government acts as a mechanism of justice against the evildoer, that when it steps out of that bounds, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish said government, repurposing its foundations. And we are forgetting what it was about. And that's why the American Journey experience exists. Because if we continually forget what our heroes actually fought for, we won't know how to honor them. And you don't honor them by remembering just what they did. You honor them by living with an increased devotion for what they died for. And if you would rather live on your knees than die standing up, you are not worthy of the freedom that they gave you. Now, a lot of people, specifically the 1619 Project. Raise your hand if you guys are familiar with a lady named Hannah Nicole Jones. So you guys are familiar with that crap. Hannah Nicole Jones wrote something, for those of you unaware, called the 1619 Project. Long story short, her idea was to reimagine the beginning of America. It was that, you know what? America didn't start July 4th, 1776, when our founding fathers began signing the Declaration. It really started in August of 1619 when the first slaves arrived in Jamestown. That's why she wrote the whole 1619 Project. And I was on a show with Glenn earlier last year in which we talked about the 1619 Project and a lot of the lies that she was promulgating throughout her educational research that she has sent to universities across the country. And one of her responses to the claims that I would make about the Declaration and who it was for, she would say, Elijah, it's cool and all that you say all men were created equal, but when Jefferson wrote those words, he wasn't talking about people like you. He wasn't talking about half your family. He wasn't talking about your grandpa. He was talking about wealthy white landowners who were sick of King George III and didn't want to pay taxes without representation anymore. And when I was a younger patriot, I didn't know how to answer that. I didn't know what to say. At first I would just say, well, the founding fathers were a broken clock. They were right twice a day, and that was something pretty awesome to get right. But I thought that way until I found out this particular artifact existed. Soundboard, would you mind bringing up the Declaration for me? In our collection, we have an artifact, which is the first draft of the Declaration of Independence, but it's an 1829 reproduction. But the reproduction in of itself is, in fact, the artifact. Because that reproduction that you're looking at was made by Randolph Jefferson, Thomas Jefferson's nephew. And after Thomas Jefferson, who was the penman of the Declaration, dies in 1826, Randolph goes into Jefferson's home in Monticello and finds the original draft. He then picks up those papers and he begins reading. And he sees things in this original draft that didn't make it in the final. But it's important because it starts elucidating and revealing what Jefferson and Adams and Benjamin Franklin envisioned for the beginning of this nation. And envisioned what they meant when they said all men were created equal. And wouldn't you know it, Thomas Jefferson actually writes about slavery in the Declaration of Independence first draft. Raise your hand if you're about to know, if you know what I'm about to say. I see 4 hands in a field of about 200 people. This is history we were not taught. And when I reveal this to you, use this in fervor and power, convincing your brothers and sisters of this country. Soundboard, can you go to the next slide for me? Jefferson writes an anti-slavery grievance in the original draft. I know it's hard to read here, but what he tells the king as one of the final grievances in the entire document, he says this. He says, he has waged a cruel war against human nature itself, violating its most sacred rights of life and liberty in the persons of a distant people who never offended him, captivating and carrying them into slavery in another hemisphere or to incur miserable death in their transportation thither. This piratical warfare, this opprobrium of infidel powers, is the warfare of a, quote, Christian king of Great Britain determined to keep open a market where men, all capitals, should be bought and sold. What is Jefferson talking about? He's talking about slavery. And how one of the reasons why we were starting this nation was in hopes that we would abolish the practice that the king refused to let us end. And that statement was supported by Benjamin Franklin and John Adams. And yet the only thing our public schools really want to teach about Jefferson is, well, he owned slaves. But what they don't want to tell you is that he understood that the natural progression of the history of this country is that when he said all men were created equal, and then he capitalizes all men, he was linking the two. The DNA of our country was freedom. But it was freedom imperfectly applied. Because eventually, they would take a vote on that grievance. And this is where, again, Hannah Nicole Jones loves lying to the public. She's like, well, yeah, Jefferson may have written that, but he didn't end up including it in the final draft because it didn't end up there. And because he was just a racist bigot. Doesn't want to tell you what actually happened. You can read it for yourself. July 2nd, 1776. You can read it in his diary. And he records that the colonies decided to take a secret vote in which they were not going to reveal who was going to vote no. Thankfully, he wrote in his journal who voted no on that grievance. Now, one of the things that she says, and you can read this for yourself online, is that America left Great Britain because we wanted to increase slavery. That's why we wanted to leave Great Britain. Well, how interesting is it that when Thomas Jefferson writes the vote count in his diary, only 2 of the 11 colonies disagree with the inclusion of that grievance. 11 of the 13 colonies voted to send that to King George. And you're going to tell me that the DNA of our country is built on slavery when the same men in that room voting on this declaration wanted to keep that because they acknowledged that I was made in the Imago Dei, that I was made in the image of God, worthy of the same protections that they were. And how would Americans react to this history if they knew about it? What would they do if they understood that our history was one of freedom from the beginning? You see, ultimately it was not added to the final draft because the founding fathers had a decision to make. Are they going to abolish slavery and leave 2 colonies out of the fight against Great Britain? Or were they going to unite the colonies to create that more perfect union and fight on this issue at a later date? We can argue about that all day long if that was the right decision. But that's the truth. And that's the actual history. And the reason why she doesn't want to tell you that is because that makes you think differently about the beginning of your nation. And it doesn't fit with her narrative. You see, what we have to realize is that America, when we talk about the idea of American exceptionalism, it's not that America never sinned. It's that America, when in its sin, being built on the Bible, chose to always use the Bible as a reason for being the tip of the spear in freedom and the cutting edge of liberty. When we look at slavery across the world in 1776, how many countries didn't practice slavery? 0. And this isn't an excuse for America. This is putting history into context. 0 nations didn't practice slavery. When George Washington was president of the United States, or during 1776, I should say, how many world leaders at that point didn't own slaves? 0. That's not to say America, oh, look, we shouldn't blame them because it's like everyone else. The point is that America wasn't the exception for owning slaves. Slavery was the standard of the world. And what the exception was how early on, ahead of the rest of the world, they acknowledged its evil. Because we were built on the Bible. Because we were built with the proper understanding. And so some people say, well, Elijah, that's cool and all, but I don't know if the results of all of my efforts are going to amount to anything. I want to fight for freedom. I want to fight for liberty. But what if I don't see progress in my lifetime? I'm going to feel like I wasted my life. And my response to that is that your duty isn't to worry about the results. Your duty is to fight. John Quincy Adams, I believe, favorite president in U.S. history for me. He served 4 years as president of the United States, and while he was president, he attempted everything he could in fighting against slavery. Unfortunately, throughout his entire tenure, he was constantly kept from passing laws for its abolition. After he left the presidency, losing his election, he decided that his work against that institution would not end. And so he holds the distinction as being the only president in history to then go back to the U.S. House of Representatives, and he fought for another 18 years. And in the first 13, he continually talked against slavery. As a matter of fact, every single time he was allowed to speak in the U.S. House of Representatives, he would only talk about slavery. The bill could have been about tariffs. It could have been about the border. It could have been about fiscal policy, monetary policy. All he would discuss are the evils and horrors of slavery. Eventually, the U.S. House got so sick of him, they placed a censure motion on him. And after he was censured and not allowed to speak, he was walking down the steps of the U.S. Capitol building, and a reporter runs into him and says, "Hey, Adams, how does it feel to have wasted your life? 4 years you were president of the United States and you got nothing done when it comes to slavery. Another 13 years you've been in the U.S. House, and yet you still have not been able to pass anything against slavery, and your colleagues hate you. How's it feel, bud?" And he looks at the reporter and he says, "Feels great, because duty is mine, but results are God's." You see, your job is not to worry about the fruit of your righteousness. Your job is to do what is right despite what it will cost you. And God will then carry that goodness on to the next generation. Another 5 years, John Quincy Adams would fight, and eventually he would end up suffering a brain hemorrhage on the House floor and die in the back of the Speaker's office. But that would not happen before a young man would end up getting elected to the U.S. House of Representatives. And that young man, being elected from the Whig Party, undoubtedly heard the speeches that John Quincy Adams called the hellhound of abolition at that time. He undoubtedly would have heard those speeches that he gave so staunchly from the House floor. And eventually that U.S. House rep would go on to fight for the same cause, but he would lose re-election. And he would continue to try to go back to the House, try to go back to the legislature, try running for various offices, and he would lose every single time until he won the only election that actually mattered, which was as our 16th president of the United States, Abraham Lincoln. You see, John Quincy Adams planted a tree for shade he knew he was never going to enjoy. And it wasn't his job to see the result of his fruit. His job was to give it and hand that torch of freedom off to the next person to finish the good work that God had started. But some of you think, Elijah, America is too far gone. We are $34 trillion in debt, which has indebted 6 generations of unborn Americans. We have murdered over 64 million babies, which comprise the most innocent population on the face of the planet because they don't even know sin. We've forgotten that there are just 2 genders. How in the world are we going to get out of this one? And here's the truth of the matter, is that your job is not to find out or figure out if this is liberty's last cry. Your job is to remain faithful in doing what is right. One more story. There was a man named Colonel Abraham Davenport, and he was a legislator in the legislature of Connecticut. And while he was creating laws in 1780, there was something known as the Dark Day. You can look this up afterwards. And in the Dark Day, it talked about how there was an eclipse of the sun and how darkness fell over the whole town for 2 full days. And while he and other members in the midst of the Revolutionary War, they're trying to pass measures to secure prosperity for their children, and they notice that as they're reading their bills, the sun is disappearing from the sky. And they look around and they walk outside and they say, it was mid-afternoon, what happened? And you could see that fear was palpable on the entire town. Eventually, members of the legislature come back into the building and they look at the speaker and they say, Mr. Speaker, we ask to adjourn. We believe today is the coming of the Lord. And if it's the coming of the Lord, we want to be with our families. Colonel Davenport then stands up and he says, I object. Because today is either the coming of the Lord or it isn't. If it isn't, there's no reason to adjourn. But if it is, I wish to be found right here standing, doing my duty in the cause of liberty for my people. And so the truth of the matter is, America, I cannot tell you if we're going to win this war. I can't tell you if we are going to be able to defeat the neo-Marxist agenda that is running rampant through our middle schools and up into the upper echelons of government. I can't tell you that we'll be victorious, but what I can tell you is this, is that if we do our duty, then we can enter those pearly gates, stand before the throne room of God, blameless, having done our Christian duty. But if we are successful, then we send these kids in this room into that 22nd century with that torch of freedom from the point at which God called the rest of us home. Amen? Amen. Thank you guys so much for having me tonight. God bless you. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Elijah O'Neill.
How was that for a good story time? He has a gift of 10,000 tongues, I swear. I love his passion. And that's the same passion that I felt when I was in Dallas and heard him speak for the first time. Thank you, Elijah, for sharing your gifts. Appreciate you. He's leaving, so yeah, give him a round of applause. I read this quote once that says, you won't defend the thing you don't love, and you don't love the thing you don't value. And what they've taken away from us is our love and our desire and our value of our country. So thank you for inspiring us again, Elijah. I'm so grateful for the work that Mercury One Radio does and for the American history experience. We're going to transition just a little bit, but before I do, I want you to know, as an elected official, a little bit of my background. Just quickly, I was fighting for education freedom at the Capitol for our local school districts when I felt like our school board members couldn't advocate for themselves for fear of losing their accreditation and their funding. And I also was advocating for the teachers who were asking to be released from the grips of a public education system and a bureaucracy that had a chokehold on them. So I found myself going to the Capitol, and I often thought as I was up there, like I said, for about 10 years prior to running, you do not know the power that you have. You do not know it. If you did, we wouldn't have the problems that we have. So I want to just take a minute and recognize some of those special people in my life that started me on this journey. Lawrence Franken, will you please stand? He was a school board member who actually worked with us to try to get legislation passed that would rein in the Department of Education over our public school system. Thank you, Lawrence, for being here. Riley Hartwell, where are you, Riley? Riley Hartwell, give him a round of applause. I ran into Riley, I think her first experience was together. He was a senior at the Joplin High School, and they had a club of students, wasn't it, Riley? And they were, too, trying to fight the tyranny in their public education system, and they reached out. I don't remember how exactly we found each other, but now Riley is the school board president of Joplin High School. So give him a round of applause. And lastly, my friend Tanya Long, will you stand? She was one of the freedom fighter moms from across the state that I worked with to, again, pass legislation that would rein in the Department of Education over our children. And that the thousands of women like this who are trying to defend their kids from what's going on. And she surprised me tonight by showing up, so it makes me a little emotional. I apologize for that. So I liken to the legislature as if it were who watches football, right? No, there is nobody who watches football. I'm in trouble. So when I speak to the high school kids, I say to them, I said, okay, who watches football? Who doesn't love football, right? The kids all raise their hand. And I say, that's what politics is like. You've elected me, I'm your quarterback. I've got the football. I'm trying to get to the end zone. Have you ever watched a football game where you have no offense? How good of a success is the quarterback going to have trying to get that ball to the end zone when there's no offense? You are my offense. I want to talk to you a little bit about this week, and wasn't planning on doing this. Sorry.
It's okay.
There was a piece of legislation that was passed this week out of the Senate. It went from 12 pages in one day to 157 pages. No fiscal note and no time to read the bill. And I was told I needed to vote for it. There was no way that that piece of legislation could have been read in 3 hours. I was told that needed to vote for it so that it could continue down the path and, we'll talk more about it, is what I was told. So went ahead and compromised. I won't be doing that again. So just when you hear, this is why you have to have a connection to the people who represent you. So if you could take out a piece of paper or your phone and type this number in. The number is 417-216-6077. And if you'll text that number and just tell me what your passion is, right? Our police officers, tell me it's law enforcement. If you're a teacher, tell me it's teaching. If you're a business owner, tell me you own a small business. Just text whatever it is that's on your mind and your heart that's pressing on you. And what that does is this is like a group text. I can send something to all of you in one text, but when you text me back, I'm the only one who sees it. So this is my SOS line. This is my way of saying, this is what's going on. I represent you. I have 4 short years, potentially 8 if I earn them from you, to do this a little bit different. And to set the bar and the standard high enough that you know your own value. Please. 417-216-6077. Please text me. You are my offense. I will vote how I feel my conscience dictates, but I need you to know why I'm voting the way that I am. So, I'm sorry for that. That was a little digression in the program, but I felt like I needed to say it. At this time, we're going to have our Passion Award presentations.
Our first Passion Award recipient is Clifford Wirt. I cannot imagine an individual who is more qualified to receive this impressive award than Clifford Wirt. In my role as past president and chair of Connect to Culture, I have had the privilege of working with Clifford since 2008. He jumped in with both feet immediately as Connect to Culture began in its infancy, then became a 501c3 and blossomed into the organization it is today. A highly respected nonprofit that provides art services to all arts and culture organizations in Joplin, the visionary leader of the Harry M. Cornell Arts and Entertainment Complex, and a performing arts presenter. Clifford led the efforts to broaden the development, availability, and appreciation of the arts in Joplin. Clifford retired in July 2013 from Joplin Regional President of U.S. Bank after nearly 40 years with the bank. His volunteerism was notable during those years, but after his retirement, he became more than a full-time volunteer working countless hours for Connect to Culture, as well as other organizations and initiatives that he committed to support. He has been very vocal and active in his commitment to see Joplin and this region prosper through economic development and improved quality of life. His knowledge and skills in banking made him an excellent asset for Connect to Culture as our CFO since 2010 and as our president since 2015. He has been the leader of Connect to Culture and one who has helped to make the Harry M. Cornell Arts and Entertainment Complex a reality. His passion for and commitment to the vision is a visual and performing arts center in downtown Joplin has never wavered, even after their tornado. He has been our fearless leader, our rock, always leading by example and working tirelessly and passionately without expecting recognition. There are no hidden agendas with Clifford. His time and efforts are all about making Joplin and our region a place to work, live, play, and stay. Past community board services include Joplin Regional Prosperity Initiative, Joplin Area Chamber of Commerce, Joseph Newman Innovation Center, Joplin Capital Corporation, Victory Mission and Sports Complex, the MSSU Alumni Association, and the leadership of Christ Church of Orinoco. He also served as a voluntary chair of the citizen-driven Vision Joplin 2022 effort from its inception until December 2017 to present. The community service includes president and CFO of Connect to Culture, treasurer of Harry M. Cornell Arts and Entertainment Complex, trustee of Ozark Christian College since 1988, and during the tornado recovery, Wirt served as co-chair of the Infrastructure and Environment sector of the Joplin Citizens Advisory Recovery Team. In 2013, he was named Joplin Area Chamber of Commerce's Citizen of the Year in recognition of his commitment to the community. In 2015, he was recognized as one of 15 regional men of distinction by the Joplin Regional Business Journal. And also, in 2023, Clifford was recognized with the Distinguished Alumni Award from the Missouri Southern State University. Thank you, Clifford, for all the work that you do in our community. This award is for you.
So these are people in our community that have given, we had a few members of our community get together and talk about some of the people that come to their mind that give so much to our community. And so there were some nominees, and these were our finalists. So I'm gonna have them come up. Kristen, is she here? But I'll go ahead and and read just a little bit about her. So it said, first and foremost, Dr. Christy Moran is a Christian and that has been evident throughout her life and to anyone who knows her. Dr. Moran has been married to Chris for 39 years. They have 2 sons, Caleb and Aaron, along with 2 grandchildren, Ruth and Ernie. She has served the students of the community of Seneca for the last 5 years as Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction. Dr. Moran has dedicated her life to the education and service of others in Southwest Missouri. In addition to her role in the Seneca School District, she worked at the Crowder College Women's Success Center, served as an adult education coordinator for Southwest Missouri, taught middle school in the Joplin School District, and was an elementary principal in Lockwood and Pierce City. Dr. Moran invests in people and is someone you can count on to listen. She loves kids and works tirelessly to meet their needs. Every child, every day, whatever it takes. Guides the Seneca School District, and Dr. Moran embodies that spirit. There are many people who profess a passion, but there are a few like Christy who live that passion and dedicate their life to the pursuit of it. Faithful, trusting, caring, hardworking, honest, reliable, sincere, and humble are just a few words to describe Dr. Moran. She is the last person to seek praise, but always the first to give it, and that is why she is so deserving of this recognition. And that was from Brandon Eggleston, the superintendent of Seneca. Matt, are you here? Oh gosh, thank you. This is for you. Thank you so much for the work you do. Is Cheryl here? Cheryl, come on up. I'm a little blind, you have to get my attention. Cheryl Konarski. So Cheryl, glasses back on. Cheryl Konarski has spent the past 37 years in the emergency communication field and has been, come on up, and has continued to expand her knowledge with professional experience and educational achievements. Cheryl began her career in San Bernardino, California in 1982. During this time, she was able to gain extensive knowledge in the emergency communication field and took on many extra responsibilities, which further expanded her abilities in leadership. Cheryl obtained a degree and has achieved certifications as a public safety executive, CPE, through APCO International, registered public safety leader, and completed the Center Management Certification Program certification through NENA. You're going to have to explain later what all of those acronyms mean. In 2022, Cheryl was nominated and awarded the Missouri Public Safety Commission Award. Cheryl is currently pursuing her bachelor's degree in public safety. Are you really? That is so awesome. Cheryl is a model of student and servant leadership. Over the course of her tenure with the Joplin Emergency Communication Center, Cheryl has made it a point to lead from the front. The ECC has had its challenges, and Cheryl has used her education and experience to utilize out-of-the-box problem solving to allow the center to continue to thrive. There have been several examples of this, but in 2021, the Joplin ECC experienced a cyber attack which placed most operating systems into failure. Cheryl was able to use her experience, leadership, contacts, and out-of-the-box thinking abilities to keep the dispatch center operating. You see our police officers down there, I'm sure they're ecstatic about that. She maintained what systems could be salvaged and formulated plans to adapt and overcome the challenges that were presented. Despite the difficult workload, Cheryl worked tirelessly beside her employees to ensure emergency response times were not extended and continued to help her employees. When systems were restored, it was discovered that Cheryl and her team were responsible for handwriting over 1,000 calls for service. Over the past few years, the Joplin ECC has had a lack in staffing. While Cheryl's primary job is the director of communications, she took it upon herself to go above and beyond to keep the center staffed. Cheryl volunteered to return to a console as a dispatcher and took the least desirable shifts for 6 months. Cheryl worked overnight shifts up to 6 days a week. She continually altered her schedule to adjust for vacations, time off, and 6 days that her employees needed. While doing this, Cheryl would routinely report to work up to 4 hours early each day to continue her administrative responsibilities for 5 months. Cheryl worked many long hours beyond her normal schedule to keep the center running. Since then, Cheryl works tirelessly to ensure that the Joplin ECC is working at its best. She works as a dispatcher each week to be part of her team and continues to improve everything within her capabilities. She often finds herself training and mentoring new employees. She serves as an active member of the Joplin Police Department's recruiting team. She uses her vacation time while teaching other dispatch directors across the nation. You need to use some rest. Recently, Cheryl attended a work session in Washington, D.C. where she spoke to legislators about making 911 dispatchers and first responders. Where she spoke to legislators about making 911. What did you?
First responders.
Okay. Oh, gotcha. Okay. This has now become a law in Missouri. She is currently advocating for local dispatchers' first responder benefits. Thank you, Cheryl. Okay, Jorge. The price is right. You're the next contestant. I'm dating myself, I think. Come on up. Mr. Zapata, let's talk about him a little bit. Mr. Zapata is a resident of Newton County. He has worked at Crowder College for 22 years. He currently serves as a division chair and instructor in the agriculture department. Jorge grew up with a single mother after the passing of his father. She instilled solid values, including the importance of always offering hands when you have the opportunity to do so. Jorge carries this value into his professional and personal life for the betterment of our communities. At Crowder College, Jorge readily rolls up his sleeves to pitch in outside of his contracted duties. He strives to model servant leadership by sponsoring the Aggie Club, where he rallies students to help when the neighborhood is damaged by tornadoes, floods, high winds, etc. You need to hook up with my husband. In this capacity, he leads the group to remove debris, mend fence, fix barns, etc. Jorge was part of the group that volunteered to put on the annual fundraiser rodeo for Neosho that is in its 12th year. He leads the charge for providing all of the food for that massively successful fundraiser, the proceeds of which go directly to student scholarships. Jorge is known as the guy who will feed everyone and their dog, quote unquote. He has worked to provide an annual banquet for area veterans and sponsors meals for the Missouri Cattlemen's Association. He's provided meals for the Joplin First Responders, annual appreciation barbecue as well. He has even jumped into act as assist in college theater productions. I need to keep these bios for later. Jorge's heart for others extends outside of the workplace. He was a founding member of the LULAC, all right, in Monette. What is that? Okay.
The League of United Latin American Citizens.
All right, awesome. Sometimes as a legislature, you get all these acronyms, and it's always due diligence to ask what they are. So that's in Monette, and also the 4-H group. He has volunteered to speak to countless high school groups and at FFA conferences on the topics of perseverance, leadership, and being an oddity in a group. As his faith plays a pivotal role in his life, Jorge teaches a weekly Bible study group for students. In addition, he is lay pastor for Risen Ranch Church, a youth camp counselor for Risen Ranch Bible Camp, and a youth camp counselor for Rodeo Bible Camp in Colorado for 10 years. As his mother taught him, he is the guy who helps neighbors build fence, assists stranded motorists with fuel, pulls people out of snowbanks, and is well known to gift a life to hitchhikers. This stems from his belief that we get what we give. Jorge's models his servant leadership for his 3 sons every chance he gets, and his outreach extends well beyond our Missouri borders. He has served on the board of directors for the National Professional Agricultural Student Association and board of directors for the federal HEP and camp organizations. You need to hand out your number later, maybe too. We need to get you some more help. So, with no further ado, thank you, Jorge. Thank you so much. Aaron, you want to come on up? Let me introduce you to our next speaker. Aaron Dorr is a political activist with over 10 years of experience fighting for the Second Amendment in state legislature, including Iowa, Missouri, Minnesota, and Wyoming. He's a force, can you tell? As a policy advisor for the Missouri Firearms Coalition, Aaron ran a statewide grassroots lobby effort that led to the passage of constitutional carry and stand your ground legislation in Missouri in 2016. Since that time, Aaron continues to assist the organization as they work to stop red flag gun seizures, defend the state's constitutional carry law, and work to end deadly gun-free zones. Please welcome Aaron Dorr.
Well, thank you, Jill. I appreciate that. Bio is a little bit dated. We've passed some more gun laws here in Missouri. We're going to discuss that here in a few minutes. But again, my name is Aaron Dorr with the Missouri Firearms Coalition. And yeah, any MOC members in the house tonight? Any members in the room? Very good. We got some. There's always room for more, though, so come and find me afterwards. So the Missouri Firearms Coalition, for those who don't know, is the only state-level gun rights organization you have in Missouri that fights to defend your gun rights. That's it. When Congressman Burleson was representative, he's gone, right? Is Eric Burleson gone now? Congressman. When he was in the State House, Eric Burleson was the guy who helped us pass constitutional carry, stand your ground law, lifetime carry permits, enhanced castle doctrine, and on it goes. And when he was in the Senate, the Missouri Firearms Coalition and now Congressman Burleson passed Missouri's Second Amendment Preservation Act, which has Joe Biden enraged right now in Washington, D.C. So Missouri's got it going on when it comes to the Second Amendment. So the question I've been asked to talk about tonight is, where are we now in the fight for gun rights? Not just here, but we'll discuss here too, but federally, where are we at? Because for the first time, I think, everybody's lifetime, regardless of your age, we have a president now, I should say a resident now in the White House, who is openly telling us his plan is to disarm this entire country. I mean, it's every 3 days he hobbles up to a microphone and says, we're going to take away your AR-15s, we're going to grab your magazines, and that's it. And he's not hiding this at all. Think back 8 years ago, Barack Obama is in the White House, and if you had said the Democrats want to disarm all of us, they'd call you a quack. They'd say you're a nut, too much tinfoil on your head. 8 short years later, this is where we're at. These people have declared complete war on our right to keep and bear arms. They don't hide it at all. If there's any good news in any of this, it's that we have a lot of gun owners now who are getting wise to the fact that if we don't stand up and get involved in the fight to defend our freedom, we're going to lose them. A lot of people, probably not folks, you guys are all activists, that's why you're all here, I get that. But for a lot of gun owners, we sat back for a long time and said, they're never going to do that here. And now a lot of people are realizing what stakes we're playing in these days. A lot of other people have also realized why we actually have the Second Amendment. Again, you'd be a quack discussing this 10, 15 years ago, but people are finally realizing, I have 7 kids, I got 2 of them over there right now. I love hunting with my kids. I love going to the range with my kids, but that's not why we have the Second Amendment. Well, yeah, exactly. Our founding fathers knew, because they just freed us from the tyranny of the king, right? And they knew that all government tends to be tyrannical over time. So they put in our Bill of Rights an absolute right for we the people, not the government, we the people, to keep and bear arms. Because they knew that eventually all governments turn tyrannical. And by having this right in our founding documents, it's the final check on tyranny. The problem we have now is that Democrats are also going all in. Now that we have Joe Biden saying every 3 days, I'm going to take away your AR-15, the Democrats from the White House to the State House, right here in Missouri, they're literally going all in. Every day pushing more crazy gun control bills. We had Representative Kevin Windham from Missouri just 10 days ago sponsored a bill that would require everybody here to give the state of Missouri a list of every gun you own every 12 months with a signed affidavit. And if you don't do it, and if you're not complete, it's a civil penalty assessed against you by the state of Missouri. We have other Democrats and rhino Republicans right now in Missouri who are talking about red flag gun seizures. You know, your ex-spouse can call the cops and say he could be dangerous, and they'll come and grab your guns before you've been to court, before you've been convicted of a crime. That's not just Democrats pushing that, that's Republicans right now in Missouri. Not this one, just to be clear. I should clarify that. And we have constant efforts to repeal stand your ground law, constant efforts to repeal constitutional carry, and everything else that we care about. So the stakes have gotten a lot higher. On the pro-gun side, people care more. They know what's at stake. On the other side, the Democrats are going for the kill shot, and they're being aided often in Washington, D.C., and here in Missouri by backstabbing Republican traitors. Sorry, I just have to get that said. So the good news, though, is that we have ferocious champions for freedom now in Missouri that we haven't always had, who are pushing back on the inside. We have Senator Rick Bratton, who is leading the fight to enhance stand your ground law here in Missouri, a badly needed bill. We have Senators Hoskins and Eigel who are pushing to ban red flag gun seizures. Not just stop them, ban them, and make them illegal here in Missouri forever. And our very own Senator Carter is leading the fight to give us protection from spurious civil liability charges if you're forced to use your firearm in a self-defense situation. So you might not know this. Yeah. Is it SB 989? Yeah, SB 989. You might not know this, but right now, if you use your firearm here in Missouri, you have no protection from a civil suit. None. Even if you're never charged, or if you're charged and found not guilty, the same thug who attacked you in the street can attack you again in civil court. And Jill's bill would fix all that here in Missouri. Thank you for filing that bill for us, Jill. It means a lot. And we do have some in Washington, D.C. who are pushing back as well. Because how many people here get sick and tired of seeing Republicans campaign on the Second Amendment and do nothing once they're safely in office? I mean, it's enraging. And even worse than that is when we get them a majority, they finally have a majority, and what do they do with it? Nothing. And we have a majority right now. Granted, it's 2 seats. 2 seats in the House right now, but they're doing next to nothing. There are some exceptions, though. Congressman Matt Gaetz from Florida is the lead sponsor on H.R. 374, a bill with our national affiliate, the American Firearms Association, to abolish the ATF forever. We want them gone. This agency has always been unconstitutional, but the days of trying to reform it, to try to fix it, they're over. These days, the ATF needs to be abolished forever, and Matt Gaetz is leading that fight. But much closer to home, and again, Congressman Burleson, you're missing your shout out here, my friend, is the lead sponsor on H.R. 450, a bill to repeal the National Firearms Act in this country forever. Who knows what the NFA is? Yeah. The National Firearms Act is not really a law, it's more of a shoebox. And whenever the president wants to ban some new accessory, he opens up the shoebox and he tosses in your bump stock or your pistol brace, or he redefines what a gun dealer is. He tosses it in the shoebox, he closes the lid, and he tells the ATF to draft new rules to make this item illegal. No vote in the Congress, no committee hearings, no nothing, just unilateral action to take away freedom from the American people. Congressman Burleson is leading the fight with H.R. 450 to repeal the NFA Act forever. And some people might say, well, what's the point? Because Joe Biden's not going to sign this, right? Well, we all know that. The point is, we have to know, as gun owners, separating the men from the boys, the wheat from the chaff. Don't just campaign on the Second Amendment. Fight for it when you're in Washington, D.C. And so if you won't sponsor pro-gun bills, if you won't co-sponsor pro-gun bills, we have your number. Now, our congressman is doing his job here to fight that fight in Washington, D.C. So thank you again. So I can't stand speeches that don't end with practical information that we can use as citizens when it comes to fighting for our freedoms. I'm going to give you some personal ones, and some political ones in no particular order. And I love this list. Number 1, buy unregistered firearms. Unregistered firearms. There was a time, not long ago, I mean like 10 years ago, when if you talked like that, they'd say, you got nothing to hide. Why are you considering a background check? Why do you care if the government has a list? Really? Really? I don't know about you. I don't want this president to know anything about what I own in my gun safe. Nothing. It's 100% legal, so buy unregistered, privately owned firearms. You'll thank me later. Number 2, you better be buying ammunition. Everyone knows, if you're a gun owner, how it felt in 2020 and 2021. Couldn't find anything, right? You couldn't find any ammo anywhere, not on the shelf, not online, nothing in bulk. It wasn't a good time. And this resident knows that if he can restrict our ammo abilities, it's the same as passing gun control. In fact, we just had 2 weeks ago, 25 or 30 blue state attorneys general sent a letter to the Biden White House ordering Joe Biden to crack down on Missouri's Lake City ammo manufacturing plant Independence because they don't like the fact they sell rifle ammo to citizens. So they're trying to leverage their federal contracts with Joe Biden to say, stop them from selling ammo to Missourians and to Americans or yank their federal contracts. So you better be buying ammunition when it's available. Number 3, you better be buying parts kits. What does that mean? Well, Washington State banned AR-15s last year, not even a year ago, and they have a grandfather clause. And in that grandfather clause, it says you can keep your firearms if you already own them before the ban takes effect, but if it breaks, you can't fix it. If you try to buy a 20-cent spring to fix your trigger group, that's a felony crime in Washington State now. So be buying the things you need to take care of the firearms that we do own. Number 4, very simply, do it for your kids. I've got 2 here. They can't buy guns legally, but they own plenty of guns when they grow up. They own plenty of guns. We have to think intergenerationally as Americans and lots of our freedoms, not just this one, but do it for your kids as well. And finally, you have to train with your friends, your family, and your kids. But politically, what can we do? Too many gun owners have sat in the bleachers for their entire lifetime and not got involved in the fight. We can't do that anymore. Again, you folks here, we're all cut from different cloth. Probably does not apply to anybody here. But if you know a gun owner who is just sitting back and saying they're never going to do that here, tell them to get off the bleachers and get involved in the fight. Because we need more help in Jeff City and certainly in Washington, D.C. How can they do that? They can run for office. How about that? They don't want to run for office. They could donate to candidates to folks who are in office to help make sure they have the resources they need to continue to be there fighting for us. To do that. Stop voting based on party labels alone. We have way too many candidates that fly the Team Our banner here in Missouri who are not helping to defend our gun rights in Jefferson City. You have to know who is actually supporting your freedom and who just claims that every 2 or 4 years on the campaign trail. And how do you find that out? Well, get involved in organizations like the Missouri Firearms Coalition who will tell you at election time who's been fighting for your freedom and who is not. And here's a little tip. Stop sending your donor dollars out of Missouri to national organizations who do nothing for us here in Jefferson City, and I mean nothing. They are not helping us here in Missouri. You know, Benjamin Franklin, I'm sure you've all heard this quote 100 times, famously said when he walked out of the Constitutional Convention, and they asked him, what kind of government do we have, right? And he said, a republic, what if we can keep it? You know, America's been blessed by God in ways that almost no country on earth can claim. It's a special, special place by God's grace. And our enemies in this country know that. And they are bent on destroying this country from within. They are bent. And if they do that, there's no other place like this on earth for us to go. America is the bastion of freedom. We have to maintain it. What we do in our lifetime will echo in the lifetimes of our great-grandchildren. And they are counting on us to hold that line for them today. We must hold that line. This is a debt that every American citizen owes. Our forefathers earned this right, these freedoms for us. Our grandfathers defend these rights for us. Now it's our turn to do this. That debt is payable to our grandchildren. If you're not involved in the fight, guys, get involved today. Thank you very much for your time tonight. You guys have a great night. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Aaron Dorr.
Hey, I just want to quickly go over the books that are on your desk. Those are a gift from Mercury One Radio. So please, if there's one, did I say desk? I mean your table. You can tell where I've been all week. So feel free to take those home. Again, that was just a generous gift from Mercury One Radio. So at this time, we'll turn it over to Kurt Carr.
One of my things here in the book. Okay, so I got commissioned with all the non-fun stuff to do at the end here, right? With different things, but we're way ahead of time. You heard from Jill that she likes stories, so I have a lot of time, and boy, do I have stories. And she's got a little bit of fear in her. Yeah. So we do have some stories, but anyway, like she said, this book, Elijah brought 200 of them. There's enough for everybody. So we have a bunch of them at the door, so make sure everybody gets one of them.
Thank you.
Something to think about is go on their website. He did this all free of charge. They do this free of charge. So you might think about going onto their website and donating for what they do. That was wasn't that fantastic?
Yeah.
Yeah. Wasn't this whole thing fantastic? A few people that I want to kind of talk about here. Reggie. I don't know where he is, but let's give Reggie a hand. He has put a tremendous amount of work over the last 3 months into this. Probably hasn't slept for a week. He's had a lot of people work with him. Donnie and his family's put a lot of work into this, doing the graphics, doing a lot of different things. Just countless people come to help set up. Lots and lots of people put a lot of effort into this, and it's just been a great night for the people.
Yeah.
So we want to thank Aaron coming down here, Congressman. Thank CB Eastman for the nominations for the awards. And, who else should we be thanking here? We have lots and lots of people.
Just quickly, Reggie, why don't you come up?
Yeah.
Reggie, come up.
Where is he? There he is. He's hiding back there. While he's coming up here, if you guys notice these really cool hot rods out front, have Scott Drager stand up here. Scott. Let's thank Pastor Dan for the space and the security team and all of his people that just put a lot of effort into what we do here. It's phenomenal that we have a space like this. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so he's going to be embarrassed, if that's okay. That's what we do. He won't say that's about himself, so I will. So Reggie, so you know, it's important. While I'm in Jeff City, Reggie's holding down the fort here in our community for all of you, and so he answers the calls, the emails, all of that, works the ground game. I just wanted you to be able to put a name to a face if you hadn't seen him yet, but he is a man of God and upright character, and just somebody who it was an absolute godsend. We were praying for somebody to come that would represent you well, would be attentive, And it's hard when you love your community so much to pass that baton to somebody else while you're in Jeff City, and God sure delivered with Reggie. So thank you.
Seeing he's always working, he's telling me 10 more things right there to tell him. So, how about the food? Mike. Stand up. Mike and Jennifer Johnson and their staff. It's Union Station Deli. I'd like to see all of you guys in the next 2 or 3 days over there to have breakfast. You better have an extra staff. Okay? They do a fantastic job over there. Their staff is great. And Lance and Judy, I think, helped them serve tonight. So thank you guys for what you did there. Whenever we get done here, I encourage you to visit all the booths. We have some booths back here. There's some nurse practitioners that have a booth. The coolest gun shop owner in town right here, Brandon. And his wife is not with him, but Aaron. And they've got, if you haven't been to Razor's Edge, you need to go try that before we leave here. Or here in a little while, we're going to have a drawing for a rifle that he's brought. So if you have a chance here in a little bit to go back and register for the drawing. He's got some pretty neat Joe Carter t-shirts back there also for sale. Who else? Donnie's got a booth back here to kind of check into and kind of sign up for his MAGA Locally website. That's pretty neat, and he's got some good information on that.
And we had great coffee tonight.
We had pretty good coffee.
It's that boozy water.
And there's Officer Hershey. I didn't see him. Good to see you. The flowers, I've been instructed on the tables, go to the lady that has had the most birthdays at that table. You take home with them. Did I say that well? Okay. All right. All right, well, so we'll get to these stories that I promised, okay? We'll get to a couple of stories. And I just want to share with you just a little bit of what I call just a one-of-a-kind force of nature that I call Jill Carter. And I might get emotional a little bit. She is not a politician, and you guys all know this. She really cares about people. So first of all, just picture the week between Christmas and New Year's, about a week before she became actually sworn in as senator. It's dark, late night, the Capitol eerily quiet. Here she comes, walking through the Capitol, probably midnight, carrying her sewing machine with rolls of fabric. You could have imagined that the Capitol Police probably thought, this lady's lost her marbles. Right? And it's like, well, what are you doing? Well, I'm sewing cushions. Have you ever seen the price of cushions? If you have to go buy them, you know? And this is the type of person she is. She's hauling her sewing machine into the Capitol building at night. No one, everybody else that's a senator, I mean, no one's there. But she's there because she wants to turn her office into a living room, to make people feel comfortable whenever they're there, to feel like they're at home. And if you haven't been to her office, it's got pictures of Camp Crowder and things from home. You feel like you're at home when you're there. And that's what she wants to make you feel like. It's not, there's no desk in her office. She doesn't hide behind a stuffy title or a big desk. You sit down and you're like you're at home. She has a very unique style, and everything that she does has a very intentionality about it. Back when we first were campaigning, there's a group of old gentlemen that we affectionately call the Godfathers that meet daily at a diner. And a lot of people probably know who they are. And we went over and visited with them, and I kind of sat off to the side, and I heard one of them tell her that women shouldn't be in politics, they need to be at home cooking and cleaning. And without a beat, I mean, I kind of, you know, without a beat, she just said, I'm going to make you a pie one day. And just got up and smiled and left. Well, sure enough, you know, 3 months, 4 months later, and she won the election. And she, you know, after a long day, 10, 11 o'clock at night, I guess, because I asked her, when did you do that? Well, after I got home, she makes some pies, puts them in little individual wrap packages, and takes it back to them. And I'm sure all of you guys have stories like this about her. There's a whole story about beagles and basset hounds or something, but I won't even go into that. But anyway, but it shows that she's a real person.
Yes.
And I just want to share some of that with you. You know, but don't get me wrong. There's a whole other side of her too, that she is waist deep in the swamp every day up there, fighting for what is right, for what is purposely, I mean, she's very intentional for making sure that she's representing what you guys expect her to do.
Yes.
And, you know, she's filing 20, 25 bills. She's chasing them through the process all the time. She's constantly watching hundreds of other bills and what's going on. Probably a lot of you people in the room get calls or texts throughout the week from her. Hey, how's this going to affect you? I mean, she's calling the police chief of Seneca. She's calling a pharmacist in Neosho. She's calling a superintendent in Webb City. All throughout the day, hey, I saw this bill, how's this going to affect you? A businessman in Carthage, a pastor, you know, hey, I saw this bill, how's this going to affect what you do?
Yes.
She's very concerned about how this is going to affect you. Where most of Jefferson City is going to say, it doesn't matter, this is the way I'm going to make it. We're going to tell you this is the way we do it. That's not the way she works. And so it's incredible. And if we could just figure out how to get more people like her up there, our lives would be so much different. So I say all of that, and you know, we need you guys to join the fight. I mean, she always says things like, you know, you're part of the process. Part of being the process is to, you know, being informed, coming up to the Capitol and seeing what's going on, sitting in the gallery, signing up with that phone number. We have a card on your table. Sign up on this card for us to be on your email list. This is also a donation card. It's a way you can be part of the process, because these events like this we want to continue to do, and they do cost money. By me telling you the story of her making her own cushions, she is very frugal with her money. So this money that you donate is not going to be wasted. It's going to go for things like this, for print material, very intentionally spending. You're not going to see her wasting this money like you might see on the national news with some congressman or something that's doing something goofy. But I encourage you to donate. If it's $20, if it's $10, whatever you feel like you can donate. If you want to do over $2,400, come and see me personally. We have to do it a little bit different way. So, but fill it out anyway, whether you donate or not, so we can get you on an email list, so we can keep in contact with you and let you know what's going on. That's very, very important to her, to always be in contact with the people here. So I guess I need to see, is it time for our drawing? Do we have Reggie? Yeah. Anything else I need to mention? We do all right? You want me to tell a few more stories?
Yeah.
I could embarrass you. Okay, I try to be nice, so. I'm gonna draw it. Okay. All right. The last 3 digits is 006. All right. Bo, okay.
2-1.
I think he just needs to come over to your store, Brandon. Come to your store and pick it up. Is that correct? Okay. All right. So visit the booths. Go check out the cars. Don't forget the flowers. Please fill out these cards. Like I said, the donations will definitely help with this fight. It'll help us to have more of these events. And then I have a special person that's here tonight. My uncle. My pastor uncle. He married my wife and I 36 years ago. He's married my son. And I want him to come up and say the closing prayer tonight. And he is Assembly of God, so he may not stay quiet for very long. He may talk too long. He may talk quite a while. No, I just had it.
I didn't think this was on the agenda. Yes, we need a blessing, do we not? I appreciate what I've heard tonight. Don't you? Not only is it good for our country, it's biblical. And that's important to me tonight, as it is to many of you. Let's pray. Father, Heavenly Father, we thank you for people, leaders that are willing to stand up for truth and for what's right. Thank you, Lord, that you've shown us what is truth and what is right. And we know that tonight. May your blessing rest upon them. May your protection rest upon them. Your guidance to rest upon them, and your strength to rest upon them. And all the rest of us as well, as we engage in our own world, in our own place, what we can do for the kingdom of God and for our great country and for our state of Missouri. Help us, Lord, to be brave, as you told your servant Joshua, to be strong and of a good courage. That's exactly what we need to be in these last hours. Help us to do just that. Thank you for your blessings upon this gathering tonight and for all that's been done, for all that contributed. In Jesus' name we pray. And all God's people said amen.
Hey, one more thing. We ought to have about 100 new memberships to the Missouri Firearms Coalition come tomorrow morning. Is that correct, Darren? Okay. All right. Go to the website, Missouri Firearms Coalition. All right. Thank you, guys.